Welcome to Graceguts&grit, the podcast about showing up, standing tall, and handling life's plot twists with just the right mix of grace, guts, and grit. No manuals, just real talk and survival strategies. So grab your coffee, your kombucha, whatever fuels you, and let's get into it because showing up isn't the goal. Showing up boldly, unapologetically, and authentically, that's where the magic is. I'm your host, Kemi, and today we're digging into a habit that shows up dressed like ambition, but ends up draining the life out of us: perfectionism. At first it looks like motivation, maybe even discipline, but underneath it's something else entirely. Perfectionism has a script. It says, do more, get it right. Don't be the one who messes up. And for a lot of us, especially those of us who've had to work twice as hard, that voice doesn't feel optional. It feels like a survival guide. And the numbers back this up. In a massive study published in the Psychological Bulletin, researchers tracked tens of thousands of college students over almost 30 years. And what they found? Perfectionism has been rising fast, especially the kind where people feel pressure to meet expectations that don't even come from within them. And according to psychologists like Paul Hewitt and Gordon Flett, that pressure isn't just exhausting, it's dangerous. Because the more we internalize it, the more it feeds our anxiety, our risk of burnout, and deep self-doubt. It's not productivity, it's not excellence, it's just quiet harm that hides behind high standards. So when we say we're just perfectionists, often what we're saying is, I'm scared to be seen getting it wrong. And here's the cost that doesn't get talked about. Perfectionism doesn't just slow you down, it makes you invisible. The best ideas, the risky ones, the weird ones, and the deeply original ones, they don't survive in environments where people are scared to get it wrong. That script of just one more revision, maybe next week, or I'll share it when it's ready, it doesn't end. It keeps moving the finish line. And while you're stuck refining, the world moves on without ever hearing what you had to say. So, if something feels worth saying, even if it's raw, even if it's shaky, don't wait until it's bulletproof. Say it now. Do it now. And let's be clear, this isn't about lowering the bar. It's about choosing values that do not erase you. Remember, grace isn't softness. It's a decision to not punish yourself for being human. It's permission to be human. And guts doesn't mean you're loud or reckless. It means showing up even when you're uncertain. And grit, it's not about just grinding mindlessly. It's about refusing to quit, refusing to disappear. We're not here to be perfect. We're here to be present, to make something real, to stop shrinking ourselves into silence because we're afraid someone may not like our raw edges. So, here's your moment. Make the move. Share it. Say it. Not because it's 100% perfect, but because it matters. Today, I'm joined by Danielle. She's an intuitive life coach who works with high-achieving moms in corporate spaces. And through her self-talk reset guide and her coaching work, she helps clients rewrite the internal scripts that keep them stuck in perfectionism. So she's a very, very vital voice in our topic for today. And, she just helps women show up with more clarity, more confidence, and actually obtain actual peace. Welcome, Danielle. I've followed your work supporting corporate moms and navigating burnout, self-worth, and visibility, and I'm grateful to have you here for this conversation. So let's get into it.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to talk about this because so many women don't even realize that they're perfectionists. And the gist of the work that I do is really the bare bones is I help moms listen, trust, and live intuitively. And so this topic of perfectionism is core to what distracts us from our intuition.
Thank you so much, Danielle. So our first question today is, you coaching high-performing women, especially moms in corporate roles, what are the patterns you have seen around in these women regarding perfectionism and burnout?
Yeah, so when clients come to me, it often starts with these goals that they have because they're very ambitious. They're very high achievers. And so they set sometimes unrealistic standards for themselves. They tend to struggle when it comes to rest and slowing down, taking a break, and being productive in some cases of perfectionists is a source of validation. That is something that they look forward to, and there's joy behind that. But when it comes to like this internal reflection or viewing yourself, perfectionists tend to focus on what they don't do right, or they have these cringes about the mistakes that they've made. And so sometimes not having clarity and being in a situation of uncertainty, they get anxious. One of the common things is analysis paralysis. They cannot make decisions because they are overthinking it because they are afraid to make the wrong decision.
Yeah, and that's something that I know that I also struggle with. And eventually I had to tell myself, you know what, the world is moving on. And that's a key part of why I decided to make this a topic today. Because you want to tweak everything till it's just right. And so you're silent, you're not showing up for yourself the way that you could, and your voice isn't being heard.
And I want to share, if I could, a quick story about one of my recent clients. She came to me, she was exhausted, she was overwhelmed, and she was just in so much. She was spread so thin. But one of her frustrations was that she felt was a source of her stress was her house was unorganized. And she was like, it's a mess. We can't find anything. And she just got so irritated. And she felt like the clutter in the house was one of the sources, which was wonderful that she even recognized that. But the more that I got to know her and speak with her, I learned that she never asked for help from her spouse. She never asked for help for her kids. She took on that responsibility alone. So I just wanted to bring that example in because this is one of those patterns where you just take it on yourself because it has to be done right a certain way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I've seen people struggle with, and I struggle with. You get home from work, the house kind of looks messy, not the way you would want it to look. And instead of just relaxing and just being home, you want to kind of fixate on fixing the mess. And I had to tell myself that you got to let that go. Don't try to make everything perfect every time. And that just was a key step in helping myself to relax and just enjoy the moment. Everything's not going to be picture perfect all the time.
Yeah.
So you've talked about self-talk, one of your key projects, self-talk, being a form of self-leadership. Can you tell us more about that and tell us about how the negative internal dialogue drives perfectionism and never achieving, this internal peace?
Yeah. Honestly, I think that it is this desire for perfection that drives a lot of our thoughts. And then that becomes a cycle. And so I like that, you even asked about the self-talk guide. It's something that I recently created. But in essence, coming up in such a way where you feel you have to be a certain way, a lot of the thoughts that are a result of this need to be perfect is really rooted in this fear of failing, in this fear of being judged or being rejected. And so there's this obsession that perfectionists tend to have where if I don't get it done the right way, they view themselves as a failure. And I think that's where a lot of the self-talk starts to play a role because imagine, after a long day, a perfectionist will likely replay what they believe are mistakes they made. So, and then you start thinking in such a way that's criticizing yourself. And now you're like having these negative thoughts that are doing that very thing of criticizing what you've done, what you've said, how you've done it. And to me, that's the cycle that we get in because we have this desire we want to achieve that is unachievable. And then we criticize ourselves for not reaching that level.
And do you think cultural identity or race, do you think it plays a role in this, especially for Black women in corporate spaces?
Absolutely. Culture plays a role. For me, my belief is that our upbringing is where a lot of this drive for wanting to be perfect is rooted in. And when you talk about Black women, how many times have we been taught, whether directly or indirectly, that you got to put in twice the work because you can't do the same thing that they do, right? In quotes, basically anyone who is not Black. There's this stereotype that if you don't show up the way they do and add to it, then you can't get ahead. And so that also plays a role into how we then show up. And now you have this need to be recognized, and then you get frustrated when you're not getting recognized and you're doing twice as much. So it is very disruptive to our psyche, honestly.
To you, what have you seen to be the toll of perfectionism? These things that don't get said enough about the cost of trying to be perfect all the time.
Yeah, I think that the cost of perfectionism shows up in a variety of ways. And professionally, it may show up sometimes as getting passed over. We don't put ourselves forward because we are overthinking, are we good enough? Did we do it right? Do we know enough? Do we have the right skills, right? We second guess our abilities against another's. And so in some cases, right, perfectionism can cause you to not get recognized the way that you're desiring in the first place. I remember earlier in my career being brought onto this global deployment project where the goal was to reduce some travel costs for training. And so the goal of the project was to build these virtual training rooms within our offices globally. And I was brought in to lead that tech deployment. And when they brought me in, not only did they expect me to lead deployment, but they wanted me to do it by myself. And I remember going through the process and like, okay, identifying opportunity to bring on people so I could build a team. And I remember going to my supervisor and telling him, I need help. But I did that at my breaking point because I was afraid if I said something, they will think that I can't handle it. But it took me some time. It took me some courage, right? So just I took on that burden silently and I was underwater. But when I got to my breaking point, I had to say something. And that was a struggle for me. So I'm saying that because I don't know if we would have been able to make as much progress that we had I not spoken up. But that's just an example of not putting yourself out there to say what you need, being courageous enough to say, I need help.
And it's all part of this perfectionism we talk about. You try to do it alone as a perfect employee, thinking, well, this is what's desired of me and this is what I have to do. But at the end of the day, you were able to realize and you spoke up and you got the task done with the appropriate level of help that you needed.
Exactly. And the perfectionism was the drive behind my fear to say something. Stepping into the role, you don't know what you don't know. But once I was there, I think perfectionism took my voice away. But I needed to, allow myself to be okay with not being able to do it alone.
Yeah. And that's the wisdom right there. And so this kind of leads me to ask you about the self-talk reset guide, your brainchild. Is this part of the inspiration? And tell us how it interrupts the cycle of internal pressure.
Yeah, so this past February, I actually hosted a guided meditation series called Aligned and Present, and it was specifically for moms in corporate. And so I wanted to create like this space for working moms to just step away from all the noise and just have a place to pause and just have a place to connect to themselves. And as I was putting together what I was going to do, I came up with this idea of this self-talk reset guide because I was thinking, you know what, I also want to give something that they can take away with them beyond this moment. Because sometimes we don't realize that our talk to ourselves is contributing to us being overwhelmed, to us being frustrated about the weight of carrying it all. And so that's where the idea came from. And it's really a simple guide that just has a handful of phrases that women typically think. And so what I wanted to do was just create this so that women can see that they are not alone and to help them recognize if you have these kind of thoughts, here's a way to reframe it. If you tend to find yourself thinking something like, I'm not good enough, here's a way you can reframe it. I am enough as I am, and I'm constantly growing and I'm constantly improving. And so those reminders sometimes are valuable just to pull out on your phone. Maybe set an intention at the beginning of the day just to decide I'm going to catch how I think and I'm going to reframe. And so that's where the idea and this guide came from.
Sounds like a very useful in the moment tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us about, what are your thoughts about, people who look like they're doing well on the outside, but they're trapped internally and they're struggling. What are the signs that we ought to even look out for in ourselves, maybe in our friends, that will help us determine if this is an issue?
Yeah, I love this question. And, you might see a theme in the way I respond to these questions, because I think if you are reflecting on yourself, the biggest sign is the way you think, and that drives the way you feel. Our thoughts drive our feelings. So I think for anyone who is wondering, how can I identify if I'm a perfectionist? Start with identifying your thoughts and the way these things show up in the world. As a mom in the household, for example, let's say there's housework or childcare, not asking for help. My husband don't know, things that happen. Or,
Yeah.
we don't have to do it again, right? So it's being able to let go of what it will look like on the other side of someone else doing it. And it translates easily in work, right? Because I work with leaders. And if you're a leader and you find it difficult to delegate because you want to make sure it's done a certain way, and you find yourself micromanaging people, or you be in every detail, right? Those are the signs that people on the outside might see in someone that is becoming a perfectionist or falling into the trap of needing it to be perfect.
Gotcha. So control, just the need to be in control of every little detail of every little thing all the time. That could be a sign.
That absolutely could be a sign of perfectionist. Because then I'll ask the question, what will happen if you allow someone else to do it? Or what will happen if it doesn't turn out the way that you expect it to look? And then that starts to really unveil, what's behind that fear of letting those things go.
If someone listening recognizes themselves in this scenario, what's one small but powerful shift they can make today?
So I'm going to actually give you 2 micro steps that's going to make it 1 step.
Okay.
To be honest with yourself about what you actually need. What is behind the need to be perfect? And oftentimes the need that we have is, we just need permission. We need permission to be human. We need permission to make mistakes. We need permission not to judge or to be judged. And so the second micro step is recognizing those behaviors with grace. And I feel like this one is very important. This is why I couldn't just give you one, because a lot of the things that we are doing to be perfect is to feel accepted, to avoid criticism, when actually we're doing it to ourselves first. We're rejecting ourselves first. We're criticizing, we're judging ourselves first. And so recognizing those thoughts and those patterns and those behaviors, and then being graceful with yourself. Okay, yes, I know I don't feel good enough right now, but it's okay. I like to call it thoughts on thoughts, right? You have a thought and then you are upset at yourself about thinking that, right? We judge ourselves in these moments. And so I just want to encourage people to truly give space for yourself to understand the need that you have for perfectionism, and then be graceful about it.
So this still brings us back to the core message of our show about, it's all about grace, guts, and grit. All three, always. And I'm glad you mentioned grace, about you got to be gracious to yourself. And that's something I tell people. You got to treat yourself like your best friend. Because if your best friend comes to you and says, this is what I'm putting myself through, or this is what someone's doing to me, how would you react to that? And it's also about having the guts to show up the way you are. Because like you said, you are enough. It's not about perfection. It's about you just being present and being yourself, because you are enough. Am I right, Danielle?
Absolutely. You are enough just the way you are. Meet yourself right where you are and love on you from that place, because from that place is where you're going to learn more about you and you're going to be able to operate abundantly. And this is why I love talking about this conversation, because that's when you get into learning how to listen like to that intuitive voice.
And as a final comment, tell us what you think life looks like beyond perfectionism. What are we going to find beyond that? What's in it for us?
Life after perfectionism is just freedom, letting go, release, self acceptance. You just create this sense of freedom of being just who you are, just as you are.
I love it. Thank you so much for bringing clarity and so much compassion to this topic that often hides in plain sight.
Very glad to be here today. Very glad to talk on this topic.
We appreciate it.
Now tag me at your handle. I'm listening. And remember, you do not owe the world a perfect version of yourself, but you do deserve to come as you are. So that's it for today's episode of Grace, Guts, and Grit. If something resonated with you, made you laugh, made you think, or made you say, whew, I needed that, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a review, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, Grace keeps it classy, Guts takes the risk, and Grit gets it done. And you, my friend, were built for this. So see you next time, same place, same energy. Until then, keep showing up and owning your story.